CNBC-TV18.
Hello, welcome on Media Dialogues. I'm going to look at what's happening in the world of podcasting. While OTT and digital streaming have become the rage, we haven't had a breakout moment for audio streaming yet. But content creators, especially social media influencers, are making it a point to mark their presence on this oral medium. And some notable authors, historians, celebrity life coaches have also been podcasting and have been very well received. To understand podcasting better, I'm talking today to Dhruvank Vaidya. He heads podcasts for Spotify in India and two of their top 10 podcasters in 2022. Please welcome Leeza Mangaldas, who's the Sex Podcast is India's topmost streamed podcast on Spotify, and RJ Balaji, whose Nalana Muruku is at number 6 on that list. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Dhruvank, you're in the studio here in Mumbai. Let's start with you. Give us a sense of the size of this market that we're talking about. I read somewhere that the US has about 100 million listeners and is the number 1 market for podcasts. Where is India on that list?
Yeah, so Anuradha, thank you for having me here, and it's wonderful to talk about podcasting, because that is one of the big jobs that I do, is evangelize podcasts.
Yeah.
Because it's a relatively new medium, about 7 years old in India.
Yeah.
But in recent times, we've grown phenomenally. And if you look at it today, 1 in 4 music listeners is a podcast listener. It is really at a time where podcasting is getting much deeper into India. It is getting adopted in our Indian languages. And there is a wide range of subjects which are getting explored.
But is there a ballpark figure for the size of this market in terms of active users or listeners?
So a few years back, there were reports that India is the number 3 market globally.
So that would be third after China?
Yes, third after China. But then there are no officially known numbers about the size.
Right. Let me get Leeza in. Leeza, congratulations. The number 1 podcast on Spotify in 2022. How does that feel? Let me ask you that typical cliched question. How does that feel?
I am so pleasantly surprised that there was that big an audience for sex education. You know, when I started this content, I really thought that there'd be so few people willing to listen and make this a priority, because it just feels like such a stigmatized topic by and large. And I've been doing sex ed content in some form on various media for the last 5 years. But I feel like in the last 2 or 3 years, and I only did this podcast as of the beginning of this year, it's only a year old, there's been so much more receptivity. I feel like there's a time when people are ready for something. And for me, it feels like the time for sex education is now. And so it really feels like fulfillment of a vision that I've had for such a long time, you know, to finally see a number. I mean, even though numbers aren't everything, I feel like to have sort of conclusive evidence that this is important, this is valuable, and people do want this information is extremely gratifying for me as an educator. And I'm also really glad a platform like Spotify was willing to back such content.
You had videos on YouTube, right? Which you started before your Spotify podcast, which you said you started earlier in 2022. Give us a sense of how do you see the audiences that the two very different media have delivered?
So I'm actually on YouTube, Instagram, and now most recently on Spotify. I think that, social media like Instagram was very photo-centric until relatively recently. So YouTube was a platform where when you had something to say or an opinion or something educational to share, it felt like long-form video was your go-to, because, how do you take pictures of something? Instagram was like a flex your fashion, beauty, and lifestyle kind of platform primarily when it started. I think it's also evolved to be more conducive to sharing educational content now. I think there was this shift as soon as video was introduced on Instagram as well, where, and I think Gen Z has been a big part of that. The consumer preferences, I feel, of the younger audience is like a bit different. I think relatable is the new aspirational, There was a time when you wanted to be able to look up to the person you're watching, and today I think you want to be able to relate to the person you're watching, not sort of deify them or put them on a pedestal. And I think that's very conducive to creating a community around information, where it's not so much, how you look or how fancy your setup is or whatever, but rather the value you're able to bring with what information you're sharing. And audio takes that one step further, where you're not even viewing someone at all, right? You literally can't see the person. So it does not, I could be in my pajamas in my bedroom, and it really doesn't matter. I think the barriers to accessing like the production becomes so much lower, right? You don't need light studio costumes, makeup, this, that. You literally need a good idea or something you know a lot about or are passionate about.
Be able to express it.
And that's really exciting. I think also the listeners' attention is therefore in a strange sort of way more focused.
Interesting. Balaji, you're an RJ, a radio jockey. So FM radio is something that you're very familiar with as a medium, both oral. So how do they compare, and what would you say is the difference for you as someone who's creating for both?
To be honest, I don't see there is any big difference in a radio show or a podcast for an RJ or for a person, someone who's creating content. But the difference lies with people where predominantly radio is listened for songs and an RJ is a disturbance. That's how I used to consider myself for the last 15, 16 years. I've been doing radio for a long time. So I'm taught that I'm a disturbance. I have to present that disturbance in an interesting way. Unlike here in podcast, where people come to the person.
Listen to you. They want to listen to what you have to say.
So that's the major difference. Like you don't have any distractions. And Leeza was saying people are focused in an audio medium. That's because, podcast, radio, both are very personal mediums. You're not talking to a crowd, and you're talking to one individual person, and I speak to one person at a time, and they feel it is very personal. That's why I think people are more focused listening to an audio show in a Spotify podcast. They feel it is for them. Generally, unlike in YouTube videos, or it is for mass media. This one is a very personal medium, and there is much radio after 2010 probably hasn't evolved in India. It was struck. I feel as an RJ, I feel in fact sad to say this, but after 2010, we still follow the same format of morning speak something like a primetime news show. 11 o'clock speak to the ladies, 1 o'clock say some gossip about films, evening play a game, night talk to lovers. So that hasn't changed. Yeah, so it is the same for a long time now. And whereas in podcast now you have a show like Leeza's Sex Education, I don't know if it is still possible in the mainstream media. And even if they want to give something in mainstream media, they'll give probably at 11 p.m. in the night. They think you can talk about it only when the kids are not awake. And
so it is okay. Yeah. So give us a sense of what is Nalana Muruku. Am I getting this right? Nalana Muruku.
Nalana Muruku.
Yeah, so what's it about? What do you talk about every time you put it out? I think on December 12th you spoke about the World Cup and the Moroccan footballer's mother on the field. See, I don't get Tamil, but I heard it and I could pick up a few of these things because of the other languages that you spatter in.
I actually, you got it like some 10% right, because I don't follow football and I feel handicapped when people talk about football all the time. Manchester United, Chelsea, I feel, okay, you don't even talk about Santosh Trophy, but you talk about English football. So I'm that person, but suddenly this football got me hooked, this World Cup, and I was saying I want Morocco to win the World Cup, and I moved on to something else. But generally this Nalla Murukku, it's a what I agree on Leeza saying that, being relatable is very, very important today than being looked up to. Like Nalna Muruk is a very relatable show. So there is no format. There is generally like every show has a format, right? I don't have a format. I speak what happened that week to me personally. And that has been the major strength, because to be in a top 10 list of Spotify in India and to be from a regional language, that is, I cater to a particular sector of people, and still being able to be part of that list is, I think, being relatable adds to that. So Nalla Muruk is a very relatable show that speak about life and my life experiences, people that I've come across. So it's a non-formatted show, and I'm happy doing it. And I also I believe it's easy to be in the list or to do a good show for a year or 2 years, but I want generations to grow listening to me. I want them to make this as an habit. So I've been doing that in radio, and I hope
Right.
to continue
Okay,
that
right.
with
So,
podcast.
right. So that's a grand ambition to have generations tuning into this. What's the kind of ecosystem that podcasters are finding? You tried to give us a sense of the audience earlier. What about being able to sustain it also? What are the revenues we're looking at? Is it subscription only, but on Spotify, or is it advertising and subscription? How does it work, Dhruvang?
Yeah, so let me give you a sense of the ecosystem we are building. So on Spotify today, content comes from 3 places. One is something that we call our originals and exclusives.
Yeah.
That is the content we commission and we put out there.
And those will be highly produced.
They would be highly produced. They would be very topic or subject specific. And that is what we are putting out as lighthouse shows. Then there is any other distribution platform can use use Spotify as a distribution medium. So there is all third-party content comes on Spotify. And finally, we have a UGC platform called Anchor. So any individual creator
Can use
sitting
that
in their bedroom.
Yeah. So
on
is
their
that what
phone.
Balaji is perhaps using?
No, Balaji is a much more advanced user. But there are a lot of individuals who sit on their phone, create a podcast and upload it, not only on Spotify, but across multiple platforms.
How do I make money off this if I'm in the business of content creation? And then how do the platforms make money?
Correct. So if you're a content creator, your primary means of revenue is advertising.
Yeah.
We as Spotify also either we commission a show, or if we sign up as an exclusive, then we give you a license fee for your show. So that is a very significant revenue stream for the creator. The creator also makes money by, let's say, having a Patreon page, doing shout outs for brands, stuff like that. Anything that a regular digital creator on any other platform does. Coming to Spotify, for podcasts, advertising is the primary revenue stream.
And have Indian advertisers and marketers really woken up to the potential of podcasts?
So we are having a lot of conversations. On Spotify, we haven't opened up advertising yet. It's likely to happen next year. But yes, whoever we have started having conversations, they're very excited. I think some of the reasons for that, as Balaji and Leeza mentioned earlier, is that a podcast is a very intimate medium. Like when you are listening to it, you're very engrossed in what you're listening. And it's very hard to forward, because the phone is either in your pocket or somewhere else. Which means you are getting a very attentive audience. You're getting an audience which is very sharply focused. Like if you're listening to Empire, you know you're talking to history lovers. So all those features make podcasting very attractive to advertisers. And the third thing is cost. It's not very expensive to create a show. Which means if you are a B2B, if you want to do B2B outreach to, let's say, your SME client.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Dialogues, and to understand the world of podcasting, I'm talking today to Dhruvank Vaidya. He heads podcasts for Spotify in India, and 2 of the top 10 podcasters of 2022 on Spotify. Please welcome Leeza Mangaldas, who's the sex podcast, is at the #1 spot, and RJ Balaji, whose Nalada Murku is at #6. So, Leeza, what are you planning to, how are you planning to build what you've created so far? And I must congratulate you, because I did go through a few of your podcasts, and it is I love the tone, the tonality you have to the subject, the way you talk about pleasure, sex, body parts. I think the last podcast was on the nipple.
Thanks so much. Thanks for checking out my content. I mean, I am on a mission to create scientifically accurate, judgment-free, pleasure-inclusive information about sex, sexuality, sexual health, gender, the body. And I love that, on Spotify, people can listen to it for free. A huge part of my goal is for this to be extremely accessible. So, on Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, actually, the user can get this information for free. They just have to look for it, or maybe even chance upon it. And I think, in a country where the sex education in schools is extremely limited, people don't talk about sex at home. You have a lot of young people having to figure out everything on their own, from how to have safe sex to how to have an orgasm to navigating contraception. And this should be information that you have easy access to.
Yes.
It's important. And the absence of it has real and quite often damaging consequences, So I'm very excited. I mean, as a creator, my opportunities to make this work sustainable are limited. A lot of this content is considered like not advertiser friendly to be eligible for the automated ads on YouTube, for example, or, to be served to audiences without filtration on Instagram even. So for me, a platform like Spotify saying, here, we want your podcast to be a Spotify exclusive, and we're going to pay you to just keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to make any hard sells. You just do we will not intervene creatively. You say what you want to say, but we want to be the platform you put your podcast out on for free. For me, that was like the dream come true. Here's a platform just paying me to do what I'm doing. No other social media platform is really paying most creators to just post, where Instagram is like this platform we all update from Mark Zuckerberg every day for free, right? So I find it very exciting that here's a platform that's trying to capture an Indian audience and is creating podcasts like mine. Or they even have this amazing podcast called Should They See Gay? I think it's one of the loveliest podcasts I've listened to in a long time, and it's a Spotify original. So, I mean, I think that it's wonderful that platforms are, standing for something and creating original and exclusive content that might not be just the conventional, like run-of-the-mill, safe, I don't know, whatever. And look, it's the most streamed podcast this year, So I feel like it's paid off, right? I think it's important to try and create not just interesting and entertaining content, but also impactful content that's going to hopefully leave your viewer with something that's going to benefit them.
Right. Balaji, give us a sense of how podcasting is adding to your personal revenue streams. How do you see this as, as a full-time occupation even going forward?
I've never seen the podcast as my revenue stream. I'm so passionate about the medium. I do films, I act in films, I direct my own films. So I do that for revenue. So podcast is something that I do for passion. Like, for example, last year, we did a show on mental health and I had this health minister of Tamil Nadu on my show. We suggested him, why can't we have a 24/7 helpline for the state for people to call up and say, see, I'm not feeling well. What should I do? Something like a call center. So he said, it's a good idea. I think we can implement, but I want to see how it is possible practically. Then in few months, he gave me a call saying that, you sir, whatever you suggested, we implemented that in the state. We have a dedicated helpline for mental health. So this was the most fulfilling thing for me to take this podcast for a long time. Like, I think we can create a lot of difference. May not be as big as this, but even small difference to someone's personal life, if I can create change, or if I can make them feel good, if they can change the perspective. Every South Indian film has a stalking scene. So if I can talk to a boy who's 17, 18, if I can talk to a boy at 17, 18 and say, see, this is not love. And if one person listen to it, I think that's my motto to take podcast. Because I don't see it as a revenue platform. Even, I'm very happy that, again, podcast, like earlier people used to ask me, Anna is brother. I want to become an RJ, what should I do? So after a point, it stopped, the question stopped. And now when I go to colleges, when I go to meet youngsters, they want to become a podcaster. So the trend is again picking. It's like football. You pick the ball, you can play anywhere. You don't need a fancy place to play. Same way, you got a mobile phone. A lot of people want to become podcasters. I personally, for me, and also to all the youngsters, I would like to say, don't make it as a medium to earn money. That is a bonus. If the content is good, the money will come.
I find both what Balaji just said and Leeza earlier, both of them, driven by their personal convictions and passion to create certain kind of information out there for people. And podcast is therefore personal and passion, it's about your own passion.
Yes.
But really, when you're actually offering people a large variety of podcasts, what percentage of podcasts would be people like Balaji and Leeza who are really doing something that's very personal? It starts from there. And then, of course, it gathers steam and momentum. But, and what percentage of it would be highly produced narrative podcasts. For instance, what Serial did in the US in, I think, 2014.
Correct.
Right? We don't have a moment like that yet here.
Yeah. So, see, Balaji and Leeza are very accomplished creators, and we have a large number of creators on the platform who are doing their shows, and that's where their passion comes through. They're very passionate about a topic and they speak about it. We also notice that in India, people listen to fiction and stories a lot. So we have done a lot of shows which are limited series fiction. Like there was a show that called Virus 2062, which is a sci-fi show about time travel. We did it with Richa Chadda and Ali Fazal. So like that's done really well for us. We did several other fiction shows, like most recently Commander Karan Saxena with Sonu Sood. So we are exploring those aspects of podcasting.
And they're getting a good response.
They are getting a great response. Because see, it's end of the day audio, the theater of the mind. Once you kind of put the story in front of the person, they kind of sit back and enjoy it. So knowledge and learning is there, and fiction is of course a big thing. And of course non-fiction narrative, like we have another show called Mahabharat with Dhruv Rathi, which talks about different aspects of India, like what is the Indian constitution, how many languages are there, XYZ. So these topics. So this is scripted, but it's again narrated by
but a big breakthrough would really help the medium, isn't it?
Definitely.
And where do you see that coming from? Do you see investments, in terms of big, massive budgets and maybe in the narrative and fiction form that would create this breakthrough? What do you think would create this breakthrough in a country like India, given what kind of entertainment it consumes and how?
So,
a case soap?
My sense is
for 2022 on Spotify. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah. So see, I mean, based on the data that we see on the platform and what we hear from people, my sense is that it'll be more of a utilitarian show.
Okay.
Something that people can go to on a regular basis. It could be about learning. It could be, let's say, revisions. Like if we put out class 10 subjects and do 5-7 minute short revision summaries of chapters, that is what kids use to revise their lessons.
Right.
And that could be done across 15 Indian languages.
Interesting. So you're saying learning and utilitarian content is what is driving listenership for podcasts at this point of time?
Yes.
That's really interesting. Leeza, I'm going to have to close the show, but you get to have a final say on what this experience is going to be like, because you've had it now for a year. How do you see this evolve, especially with relation to or with respect to the content that you're creating?
I think that since video has had its moment, is, sort of the main form of digital content that people consume. And I think people are aware that the hyper-distracted state that it lends itself to is kind of demanding on one's mental health and sense of well-being. And I really think that the podcast as an experience can provide a nice counterpoint to that. You can close your eyes, put your headphone in, have no screen to watch, and instead kind of use this as a way to unwind and be calmer and learn about something you're really interested in without it being like overstimulation. So one of my favorite ways to listen to podcasts is in bed before sleeping, headphones on, eyes closed. And I think that people are hungry for that. There's been, especially after the pandemic, just such an overload of content. Like we've had to rely on content and video for that it's like almost too much. And I think audio will be a nice relief. I really think it will become more popular. I agree with Balaji completely that it's here and it's here to stay.
Here and here to stay, Leeza, Balaji. Good luck to both of you. It's interesting the kind of work you're doing and getting to do because of the podcast. Dhruvank, thank you very much for filling us in on what's going on, and we wish you a lot of good luck.
Thanks a lot. And we're lucky to have Leeza and Balaji creating for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us on Media Dialogues. Catch us again, same time next week for another conversation. See you then.